Fox News alert as the manhunt continues for the van driver in that horrific terror attack 2 days ago in Spain. New details now revealing an even deadlier plot by the terror cell.
Spanish police saying the bombs that caused the house explosion in the nearby town of Alcanar were actually the terrorists' failed plan A for the attack in Barcelona. So, how deep does this terror cell's influence run in that region?
Joining us with his reaction is Mobin Sheikh. He was once radicalized when he was a teenager. He's a former jihadist and a terror expert, and now is helping us all try to make sense every time these horrific attacks happen. Mobin, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So how should we be thinking about this as we wake up this morning?
Well, there are a number of ways to look at it. I mean, one of them is that this is something that we are supposed to be expecting, or at least I have been expecting by ISIS in Europe. I've been saying this, ISIS is preferring, would rather have these small man teams to commit coordinated attacks simultaneously. And this is exactly what we saw in Barcelona, starting with this house explosion that happened on Wednesday night, and then the 2 attacks that happened on Thursday.
Right. It wasn't that small an operation, though. They had, it sounds like, a dozen people in all, but you're absolutely right. It all started with the explosion of the house about 70 miles away from Barcelona. That's the house where they were assembling bombs. They were going to put it in one of the 2 vans, then drive it somewhere and try to kill as many people as they possibly could. But when their bombs blew up, and maybe their suicide vests, we don't know exactly what they had, they went out with fake suicide vests and tried to mow down as many people as they possibly could. They had to institute Plan B.
Yeah, you know, so I was saying as well yesterday, I mean, especially when all this information was coming out, that it's like the iceberg model, right? You see the tip of the iceberg sticking out of the water, and underneath the water is a much larger piece of ice. This is like the network that we're looking at. I mean, initially we only had a handful of individuals who were involved. Now I think it's up to 8, if not 12, as you said. And that's just what is visible above the water.
Right.
And there's a much larger network that's at play, at work, underneath the water.
Right.
And that's what I'm looking to see Spanish police move on in the coming days.
But I want to get you to the mentality of the individuals that are doing this. Geraldo, I thought, brought up a really good point. He said, and I agree with this, as a young man myself, when I was in this 18 to 22, 23-year-old range, I was focused on 2 things, quite frankly, and a lot of American males can say the same. I was focused on girls, and I was focused on sports. These individuals are focused on terror, much deeper thinking that is rooted in hatred and misunderstanding. How does this happen? How do you get to that mental state? And what can we do to prevent this? What can we as Americans do, American military, American counterintelligence, do to counteract this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you know, it's almost like a running joke where, you know, a lot of these guys just need girlfriends. I'm not trying to minimize it or lighten it, lessen it, but look, the reality is that it's because of nature and nurture, right? I mean, largely because of how you're raised. You know, hate is something taught, is something learned, and it can be unlearned. But in the case of young teenagers who are growing up in this kind of environment, you know, usually for the Moroccan backgrounds, wherever they may be claiming that there's a marginalization, so there's a grievance factor. They might be talking about wars that are happening in the Middle East, and that might be aggravating factors for them to kind of want to do something about it. And you see this across the board, whether it's, you know, white supremacists or jihadists, hyper-masculinity, you know, this idea that this is what makes you a real man, you know, to be violent, to kill in the name of God on top of that. It's very difficult. I mean, these are social processes, you know, human psychological processes. And it's going to require, you know, psychosocial efforts by community, you know, NGOs.
Sure.
But also the hard end of enforcement. I mean, putting human intelligence, spies in the networks, catching them, prosecuting them, or killing them if we have to.
Well, Mobin, you've been through this yourself, so it's a great perspective to have on this morning. Thank you for being with us.